Assalamu alaikum, namaste, sat sri akal, shalom and good day. You are listening to Awaz Community Radio. And our topic for today is dyslexia. Now, if you'd like to get in touch with us, give us a call on 0161 839 9817. We can take down some questions and we can make sure that they get answered for you. Don't forget, we're on Facebook. Just type in Awaz Community Radio or tweet us at Awaz Radio 122. You can drop us an email. It's awazcommunityradio@gmail.com. Thank you for listening to Awaz Community Radio with your host Saira. And as I said, today's topic is about dyslexia. And my guest today is Roger. Hi, Roger.
Hi, Sarah.
Thank you so much for coming in.
Pleasure. Thanks very much for inviting me.
And can you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself?
I work at the universities here in Manchester, supporting students mainly who have dyslexia. And I've been working around the subject of dyslexia for across Greater Manchester for about 10 years in the voluntary sector, and now I'm looking to try and get Greater Manchester to develop a strategic plan for supporting dyslexics across the whole of our community.
Now, I think the first question really that should be addressed, and one listener, more than one listener has asked this, can you define what dyslexia really is?
Yeah, dyslexia is it has an impact on the brain function. I'm dyslexic, so my brain is slightly wired a little differently to people who are non-dyslexic. The impacts of which mean that I struggle with things like short-term memory, so I might forget your name easily, for example, or organisational skills not that good, and concentration can be a problem for me, as well as the usual symptoms of the 4 types of dyslexia. So that could be, I could have a problem with maths, simple maths. I could have a problem with reading and writing. I could have a problem with the way that I hold a pen. I could have a problem with the way that I control my body, so I may appear a little clumsy. So there are 4 different types of dyslexia.
Right, and it has also been asked by our listeners, is dyslexia something that can be cured?
Not to my knowledge. There are claims of it on the internet that you buy certain programs and do this, that and the other, but because it's such an innate issue down to the DNA of an individual, that our brains are wired differently, it's not something that can be cured per se, but people who are diagnosed, especially at an early age, and then supported through their adventure of getting to know dyslexia and understand it in themselves, then they can deal with dyslexia very, very well. And many dyslexics go on to be very high functioning members of our community.
And where does dyslexia come from?
As I mentioned before, it's the DNA. So dyslexic individuals are missing 8 tiny little strands from the twirl of DNA.
And what obstacles do dyslexic face? I'd like to ask before that, how can you tell if you are dyslexic, if there are listeners out there who suspect they are dyslexic?
Okay. The obvious signs for a dyslexic individual generally are perhaps they're living a little more chaotically. As a youngster, you might look for signs of slowness at learning new information, reading skills, these types of things, but it could be telling the time's problematic, or tying the shoelaces is difficult. These are just some of the telltale signs. What we really need is for schools to do a lot more testing. There's not a lot of testing goes on for individuals through school.
So I guess the obstacles for dyslexics are that, if you have an issue with telling the time, then of course telling the time is an obstacle, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's the lack of diagnosis that is really problematic. If an individual's diagnosed, then they can start working on the core issues that they know they're going to have problems with. So if it's going to be reading and writing, well, they might have extra tuition on some basic skills. Or if it's telling the time, then they may have to have extra lessons on telling the time. It's not that dyslexics cannot learn these skills, it just takes a little longer, that's all.
Thank you. And can you tell our listeners, is dyslexia hereditary?
Yeah, it's 100%, well, 95% of dyslexia is hereditary. Sometimes dyslexia can also be caused by having a head bang or something like that, in a car crash or something. But the vast majority of cases, it's hereditary, and there's a strong probability of one's parents, if you're dyslexic, one's parents being dyslexic, or grandparents, or siblings, brothers, sisters.
And how many dyslexics are there in Britain?
The British Dyslexia Association say that there are 10% of the UK population. So the UK population, somewhere between 60 and 70 million. So there are 6 or 7 million of us across the UK. However, the latest research coming out of America indicates that figure is far higher. And in the States, they are stating that it's 20% of the population.
Wow, that's a huge number. So who has the duty of care to provide support for dyslexic people?
Sarah, that is an excellent question. The duty of care really is across all agencies who are working with individuals who are or may be dyslexic. It's kind of a requirement of agencies such as schools and government agencies and housing offices and etc., the council, etc., to make sure that they are looking after their own staff who may be dyslexic, and they're also looking after the people who are in their charge. So schools at the moment do not do a lot of diagnosis. This is mainly due to the government directive that is instructing teachers not to go down the route of bringing in an educational psychologist to do a report, to do an assessment on a child, because this can be more expensive, because once a child is diagnosed, then further support has to be brought into place. However, there are cases now, and it's a growing number of cases, where non-diagnosed children are going back to the school and suing the school in adulthood because they weren't diagnosed as children. But the duty of care really applies to all of us. It's a bit like who has a duty of care to implement non-discriminatory practice. We all have a duty of care, and I would say that's the same for dyslexia. And we're protected under the Equality Act 2010, the Children's Act. There's lots of legislation to support dyslexics.
And would you like to share your personal experience of dyslexia?
Yeah, I'm diagnosed quite late in my life, over 40 when I was diagnosed, and it was very frustrating when I got that diagnosis, but it did explain a lot about myself and about my life path. But I do think it would have been far more beneficial if I'd have been diagnosed a lot earlier.
So what would your advice be to people who are out there and they're concerned that themselves have dyslexia, or somebody they know, or perhaps their child or a family member?
Yeah, it's not something to be scared of. It's not something that's, it's not a fatal disease. It's not something horrible. It just needs a little bit of thought and a tactical approach as to how you can overcome the drawbacks with dyslexia. But it comes with lots of positives. Dyslexic individuals generally are quite, they have good communication skills, very affable, warm individuals, and very creative. And there's no link between dyslexia and intelligence. So if your son or daughter is diagnosed with dyslexia, it's not something to think that it's the end of the world. It's just another individual with individual characteristics, slightly different, that's all.
That's fantastic, Roger. Thank you very much for that. And can I ask, how are you spreading the message about what dyslexia is and the support available within the BME communities?
Yeah, Saira, there isn't a great deal of support, to be honest. But what we need to do is to make sure people are empowered around the subject as much as possible. So what I'm trying to do with the BME communities is to build bridges with all sorts of different faith groups and community groups across all of Greater Manchester. And I'm lucky, because I work at the universities, I've been able to contact and be warmly received by the Islamic societies at the University of Salford and MMU, who've invited me in to make presentations to them, and they're going to come to the Dyslexia Strategy Workshop in Manchester on the 18th of October to participate in building the plan for support of dyslexics moving forward. They've also been really kind to invite me to dinners, and they're going to invite me into local mosques so that I can speak to the attendees, the people who go along, and just explain what dyslexia is, to try and break down some of that fear, some of that stigma, and just to inform people as to what dyslexia is and what we can do to support it, and what we can do to try and make sure that support is put in place either in the workplace or in the university or college, or perhaps more importantly at school age, because there is a duty of care by schools, and if you think your daughter or son is dyslexic, then you need to flag it up with the teacher, and then if that doesn't work, you need to flag it up with the head of year. If that doesn't work, you take it to the headmaster, the head teacher, and if that doesn't work, you take it up with the board of governors of that particular school to make sure that an assessment is made on the child, so that the child can then get the appropriate support needed.
Thank you, Roger. And are there any contact details or any information you can give to people who are listening who might want to speak to somebody about this directly?
Yeah, they can always give me a call on 07711 070533, or email me on msdscic@gmail.com. That's msdscic@gmail.com.
Great. And also you're on Twitter as well, aren't you?
Yeah, you'll get me on Twitter, but that's under Roger B33. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Roger, for coming in to chat to us about dyslexia. It's been really informative, and it's so good to hear somebody dispel the myths about that.
Excellent. Thanks very much for inviting me in, Sarah.
Very welcome. And we look forward to people getting in touch with you and hopefully getting the support that they need.
Excellent. That's what we hope.
You've been listening to Awaz Community Radio talking about dyslexia today. Now, if you'd like more information, any support, please get in touch with us. You can call us on 0161 839 9817. We can help direct you to Roger and get some support that you need. Okay? Now, if you want to catch us on Facebook, just type in Awaz Community Radio or tweet us at Awaz Radio 122. Thank you for listening. Have a good day.